It's going live. Got it. Okay. So we are live streamed. And I'm still just waiting a few minutes here for our president.
Oh, and sorry, Corinne. I'm sorry to hear that you're not feeling well.
Who's that?
Oh, Corinne in the chat mentioned she isn't
Going live.
under the
Got
weather.
it. Okay. So we are live streamed. And I'm still just waiting. Welcome, Hava. Hava's here. She's the chair of the AIA-LA Government Outreach Committee, and she is also on the board of directors.
Nice to meet you.
Awesome. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for having us.
Hava, we're just waiting a few minutes for Mitra. I guess she's running a little late. We'll give it about one more minute and then we'll start the program.
Of course, sounds great.
Oh, here she is. See, even with Zoom, we have traffic. Mitra, welcome. We're delighted to have you. So if you don't mind introducing yourself and we'll get the program started.
Great, sounds good, Will, thanks. So good evening, everyone. My name is Mitra Memari. I'm a partner at ZGF Architects, and I am also the 2022 president of AIA Los Angeles. I welcome everyone to the fourth in our series of forums with the leading Los Angeles mayoral candidates. Tonight, we're delighted to have our virtual stage, both Mel Wilson and Craig Greiwe here with us. Due to the last minute scheduling conflict, our candidate Ramit Varma is not able to join us and will work with his campaign team to see if we can reschedule. The AIA advocacy is an important part of our mission. And with the series of the candidate forums, our overreaching objective is to really leverage AIA-LA's leadership role, representing the regional architecture and design community, and to better understand each candidate's core values as they relate to creating and maintaining a healthy, equitable, and vibrant city, a city that works for everyone. The themes we will be discussing tonight are the issues that reflect the mission and vision of AIA Los Angeles: environmental justice and the built environment, climate action, homelessness and housing as a human right, housing affordability and development services, and vision, leadership, and the city charter. We're delighted to have AIA-LA's very own Will Wright to serve as our moderator tonight. Will, handing off the baton to you.
Thank you so much, Mitra, and welcome, Craig, and welcome, Mel. So what we'll do here for everyone in the audience, we appreciate your willingness to connect with us tonight. We'll do a 30-minute Q&A with Craig, and then we'll do a follow that with a 30-minute Q&A with Mel. So Craig, if you don't mind, I'm gonna put you on the spotlight here. And
of course.
If we could get to know you a little bit better, you know, for instance, let's start off with, why are you running for mayor rather than, let's say, running for city council? And let's talk a little bit more about your vision for City of LA and what you love most and what you think we need to focus on immediately.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm running for mayor because I hit my head a lot as a child, so obviously something went wrong. Listen, I've spent the last 20 years of my life in private business. My job was to solve complex and challenging problems for some of America's largest and most trusted corporations. And the reality of that was that everything that I approached was a seemingly impossible challenge where everyone was at war with each other. Value had flown out the window. Money was being spent incorrectly. Everybody was at odds with each other. And we needed to get a singular vision that was results-based and move everyone forward together. It sounds pretty familiar actually right now. And the reality is that, I have done that in so many different levels for Verizon, MasterCard, the late Kobe Bryant. And then in 2021, I created what became the fastest growing grassroots movement in Los Angeles, focused on common ground and common sense. In 9 months, our goal wasn't just to sign up the 100,000 members that we signed up for Rise Together to shift and amplify the narrative of common ground and common sense. It was to shift public perception. Before I started that organization, 75% of Angelenos believed that no matter what they did, nothing was ever going to change. That's not a way to live in a city. And that's what led us down this path. In just the first 9 months, we shifted that so that 75% of Angelenos believed that in this coming election, their votes would matter, that they would change things. It was about shifting the public narrative. And so that's what we need to do here in Los Angeles. We need to shift the public narrative and shift our leadership. It became clear in late last year that while we had done that successfully in many races around the city, in many city council races around the city, that there wasn't a common ground, common sense candidate for mayor. So I made the difficult choice to step away from that movement and to jump into the race with concrete, proven, vetted plans in homelessness, affordability, crime, and corruption. The reality is, for me, if you remember nothing else about the difference between me and every other candidate, is for me, every decision matters. I grew up dirt poor in rural Indiana, and every decision was a life or death decision. If I didn't go to work, I didn't eat. My classmates, if they didn't go to work, just didn't go to work. From that point on, everything to me became do or die, make it or break it. And so that's where this city is. That's why major companies hired me to come into situations that were crisis-driven to bring results. And that's why I've chosen to run for mayor. Every decision matters. And the reality is that we've been making the wrong decisions with the wrong leaders in this city for 30 years. We cannot trust the people who created our problems to be the people who solve them. And the other leading candidates that the public is openly rejecting, more than half of Angelenos don't want Rick or Karen as their mayor, have said that they've been at the seat of power for 30 years. We need to break from the past with a bold, fresh vision that is results-driven, empathy-driven, from someone for whom every decision matters, with a track record of delivering results. And that's me. And that's why I'm in this race. It is the right moment and the right time. And this city is in crisis, where we need a true outsider in the office of mayor who's willing to use every power at his or her disposal to make things happen, to move us forward with bold and creative solutions. And that's my vision. And my vision is one of bringing those bold and creative solutions to everything that we do.
Thank you, Craig. So, everyone right now realizes that the severity of our housing challenge and our homelessness crisis is, it's our number one priority right now. Craig, you mentioned in your plan support for the Community Solutions organization that has a functional zero approach. So tell us a little bit more about, how that aligns with your vision and how you would integrate. What does functional zero mean to you, and how would you integrate that into the way the city measures results or delivers results?
Of course. Well, I'm going to be very clear as I am. I love telling the truth in this race, and so I'm going to tell the truth everywhere it is, right? The dirty little secret of Los Angeles and this race is that every other leading candidate, it wants to double down on the solutions that have clearly failed and are clearly failing us in Los Angeles. We've spent $8 billion on 60,000 people and accomplished nothing. No one can tell me that money did its job. It is not how much money we spend, it's how we spend it. The difference between me and them is that I have a written, published plan that is based on what we know what works across this country. The dirty little secret of Los Angeles is that homelessness is being eradicated across America. 14 cities have moved to functional zero using the Community Solutions Plan. 98 more are on the way. Colorado is more than halfway there. Homelessness is being, I know it sounds fantastical to say, but homelessness is being eradicated across America. Why start with functional zero? Functional zero has a real independent definition, contrary to someone who shall go unnamed who's also in this race. You can't just make up a definition for functional zero. It means, in this case, in Los Angeles, that you would have no more than 40 people, 40, who are permanently living on the street. That is our goal. We need to start with a goal. Our goal cannot be addressing homelessness. It has to be ending homelessness. We know that it's possible. And we know that there is a proven methodology for doing it. If it has worked in 14 municipalities, if it is working in 98 more municipalities, it will work here too. Los Angeles is not a unicorn. And that is a 3-part program that involves real-time data, preventing new homelessness, and dealing with those on the street so that we make sure that we get the 60,000 people off the street in a cost-effective manner while regulating public space and fairly and equally enforcing the law. That solution has worked across this country, and it will work here too. And I, we can go into details for anyone that wants to get really super nerdy. All of the numbers, the budgets, and the accountability is literally on my website. If you click through, you can go, and everybody's like, "That's a lot of information." I'm like, "I know, I'm a nerd, but I love being a nerd because it's time that this city had a nerd for a mayor who actually knew what they were talking about." Oh, you're on mute, Will.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. You're right. There's quite a bit of information on your website, and I put the link in there for everyone else. You mentioned in your plan that you'd like to address this crisis without raising taxes. Can you speak to what will most likely be on the ballot in November called the United the House LA Initiative, and whether or not that would be in alignment with your goals, or do you see that as complementary, or are you still trying to get up to speed on it?
No, here's the thing. We do not need new revenue sources, and we do not need more bureaucracy. So those two things have not served us well. Just shoveling more money into a pile and lighting it on fire doesn't solve a problem. That's how these other candidates are spending their money. It's how they spent the city's money. But the reality is, and it's not just, and we hide the numbers, right? We've done the math on this. I've gone through and I've talked to city departments and I've gone through the budget. It isn't just what we put into LASA. Over $3 billion a year of the city's formerly 11.2, soon to be $11.8 billion budget, over $3 billion a year goes directly to 60,000 people, while 3.9 million have to share the rest. There is no world in which we can justify that. Yes, we need to help get people off the street, but we know how much that costs. We know how much it costs from every other city in America. I'll give you one concrete example. The tiny homes in Los Angeles that everybody's seen in all the headlines. Everywhere else that they are installed, the installation, everything that goes along with it, including all the surround sound services, job training, everything else, mental health and addiction treatment, is no more than $30,000 a person per year. And in Los Angeles, we spend $130,000 a year. And it's not because we're paying our social workers more. The reality is that we have created a system filled with graft and ineptitude. And shoveling more money into a pile for people to feed off of is not going to solve the problem. It's why I'm the only candidate calling for the invocation of a federal disaster declaration. And I say that because, not because we need more money from the federal government, we don't, but because I want to invoke federal law. Because when we invoke federal law, we will work directly with FEMA, not a FEMA-like response, an actual FEMA response, recognizing their success. When they were at their worst in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, FEMA housed 10 times as many people as are homeless in Los Angeles in under a year. And now they are one of the most efficient government agencies. Now, by invoking a federal disaster declaration allows me to invoke federal law as mayor and bypass city council, bypass the board of supervisors, bypass all of those who would stand in the way for us to effectively house people for what it's supposed to cost, not $1 million a unit in construction costs for permanent supportive housing. It allows us to bypass that arcane infrastructure to actually solve this problem. But no new money. There's no reason that we should light more money on fire. It is not how much money we have, it's how we spend it. And new bureaucracy is not going to solve that. It's the same reason that I'm opposed to the Los Angeles County Affordable Housing initiative, because it's not that I'm opposed to putting some sort of central initiative together. It's that we keep putting things together and creating bureaucracy without a plan focused on results. We focus on spending money as opposed to what we're getting for it.
Thanks, Craig. So can you talk a little bit more also with regards to, you want to do an audit of the permanent supportive housing. I don't know if you're familiar with the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing, and they've done quite a few responses to Controller Ron Galperin's audits, pointing out some of the things that many people in City Hall just don't understand about delivering that affordable housing. Can you speak a little bit about the how long your pause would be, and how that might be disruptive or not, and what your solution would be going forward?
Yeah, let me be very clear on this, is that some people will need permanent supportive housing, but that we don't know who those people are, how many, because LA doesn't even know how many people are homeless at any given point. The once a year point in time count is not real-time data. We don't know how many people are homeless, where they are, or what they need. So we are building permanent supportive housing for who and for what? We don't even know. Right? And 4,000, now 6,000 people have died on the street while we've built 1,000 units. You can't tell me that's ethical or humane. And at the same time, we're spending $1 million a unit in construction costs for something that was unanimously approved by City Council, the Venice Median project, but unanimously approved by City Council for nearly $1 million a unit in construction costs, while 70% of Angelenos struggle to make their rent. That is unconscionable. Now, here's what I know. Having spoken with groups like Sola Impact and Diversity Moves and Diversity Housing Corporation and Dignity Moves, what I know is that we can build permanent supportive housing in Los Angeles for $215,000 to $225,000 per unit at a max cost with no government financing. These entities are taking no government financing. So there is no reason that once you insert government financing, that costs should skyrocket to $800,000 a year. I've sat and I've listened to some of these groups say, well, here's how we got to this cost. And here's where just because you understand how you got wet doesn't mean you should have walked out into the rain in the first place. The reality is that it is time for common sense and proven solutions. Sola Impact is doing it here in Los Angeles. Dignity Moves is doing it across California, up and down the West Coast, right? The reality is that it is common sense that should drive our city. And so there will be a pause in permanent supportive housing, because also the answer to homelessness is not permanent supportive housing, right? Waiting for 6,000 people to die to build 1,000 units is not the answer. It is stabilization housing. It is immediate and transitional supportive housing with a requirement to use services to get people into a stabilized environment. Then you can determine who can get back on their feet versus who needs permanent supportive housing. And we know from the 14 municipalities that have moved to functional zero homelessness and the 98 more on the way, that only a small fraction of the population needs permanent supportive housing. The reality is they need affordable housing, but they don't need permanent supportive housing. Affordable housing and permanent supportive housing are two different things. And I'm sick and tired of listening to every other candidate who's been in office for 20 years, when answer a question about affordable housing, immediately talk about permanent supportive housing. They are not the same thing. Affordability and homelessness have relationships, but affordability and homelessness are not the same thing. Talk to the 3.9 million people who are not homeless, who feel like the city is unaffordable. Like, the reality is we will put more affordable housing on the market. We will build permanent supportive housing, but we will only do so cost effectively for those who need it, when we know who they are and where they are, and we can do so cost effectively. Otherwise, we're trying to backdoor the largest public housing project ever created in the history of the globe, and that hasn't fared well anywhere.
Thanks, Craig. So let's focus a little bit more on housing. This is something that the AIA is, extremely, involved with. This is the heart and soul of the Los Angeles area architecture community. Your plan says that you'd like to build ethically, responsibly, and quickly, with a commitment to at least 200,000 units of new housing in working class neighborhoods. I'm wondering, let's open that up a little bit. What did you mean by working class neighborhoods as opposed to The housing element that we're putting through right now is looking to add affordable units, even in West Side neighborhoods and other high opportunity areas. So how do you balance that between locating the affordable housing in what you call working class versus making that affordable housing in our high opportunity zones?
We need to make sure that every community in Los Angeles is a community that you want to and can live, work, and play in. So, I just did an Instagram live the other day, if people want to go watch it, with Shadeh Kisab, who is looking for new housing and for her and her 3 children. And, her response to me is, she's like, when I'm thinking about moving, she's like, it's like $12,000 to move my entire family and my business and everything else. And then I've got to figure out on top of that first and last month's rent. And then I've got to rip my kids out of the community. The reality is we cannot just keep saying, well, let's build here or only here. We do need to build across this city, but we need to designate and build in communities to build up those communities. We can't just keep creating nice communities in the ghetto, right? Like, that's not how a functional, viable city works. We have got to create, it's the same thing when we're driving new jobs. We need to incentivize new job creators to put those jobs in communities that are most in need of them, good paying jobs. This is all using market incentives to create a more balanced city where we're spread across the city. The reality is we can build 500,000 units. We can build more than that across 10 years. If the city just gets out of the way, and we can ensure that those units are affordable units for folks all across this city where they can live, work, and play. This is what moves us forward in climate change. This is what moves us forward in traffic. This is what moves us forward in everything. The affordability of housing and its availability across this city impacts every issue that this city faces. And saying that we want to just increase over here or over here, we've got to do it across the city in places where it makes sense without starting a war. Because I will never support the elimination of single-family home zoning. It is a war that you are never going to win. And it's a war that is unnecessary, right? We can build enough housing for everyone while preserving communities and neighborhoods and single-family home zoning across the city with common sense regulations.
Thanks, Craig. What about the idea of expanding inclusionary zoning citywide? Would you recognize that as a path forward, or do you think that also creates unnecessary hardships?
It creates unnecessary hardships. And why to go to war on something you don't need to go to war on, right? If we just look at key metrics of where and how we build where it makes sense, let's ask ourselves, where does it make sense to build? I'm not a fan of saying that anyone should be able to rip up their property and build 2 or 3 homes there on a single family home lot in the middle of the neighborhood. I'm not, because it's unnecessary. And by the way, it's the same reason tossing a shed in your backyard and calling it an ADU doesn't create affordable housing for anyone, even if you do assign it an address, right? Like, the reality is that if we just take common sense decisions, every latent unused industrial zone in the city, if we authorize them for mixed use development, that gives us capacity for more than 500,000 units alone. If we increase density on touch zoning along thoroughfares, there's no reason that if you're touching Beverly and Melrose that you can't go up to 6 stories. If you're on Ventura and Sunset, that you can't go up to 15, but preserving the communities behind them, preserving the single family homes behind them, that gives us capacity without creating a war. There are a lot of people who are like, well, it's not fair. And yes, this was all built on racism. And yes, our zoning code was written in 1946 by a lot of racists. Yes, we can acknowledge all of that, but that doesn't change the fact that none of those people living in those homes who bought into those communities had a role or a hand in that. And just because something's unfair doesn't mean that there aren't multiple ways to make it fair again. Wouldn't it be fair so that every Angelino, regardless of race, income, background, ethnicity, regardless of national origin or income level, was able to actually save up and buy a home, buy a single family home, buy a condo, to buy into wealth creation? Wouldn't that be more fair rather than just creating a war?
So thanks, Craig. What about the idea, and how would you work with City Council on expanding adaptive reuse citywide? Right now it's confined to a very small area of Los Angeles.
We do need to move forward with that citywide with adaptive reuse, and I believe that after this election, based on the numbers that I've seen, that there will be a common sense core to City Council for the first time in 80 years. I divide City Council into 3 different groups. My future City Council, that is, right? a common sense core of people operating from common ground and common sense. I believe that, Sam Yabri will be that in CD5, whoever hopefully comes out of CD11. You see Mitch O'Farrell tacking to the center. You see those folks. Then on the other end, you see a whole lot of people who are driven by ideology and who will never operate based on common ground or what the vast majority of Angelenos want. But in the middle are a whole bunch of people who lack a spine, which I say with respect, or as much respect as is possible. We call them bubble, right? Because they live on the bubble. They go where the wind blows. Well, when you combine the common sense core and you combine this group that goes where the wind goes, you have a majority on city council. You have a working majority if you have a mayor who is using the power of the public bully pulpit. When was the last time we saw a mayor use the power of the public bully pulpit? The last mayor who wanted to be mayor was Dick Reardon. Every mayor since then has been fueling their own personal ambition, trying to cycle into being governor, senator, or delusional enough to run for president. I'm only interested in being mayor, and I am only interested in using the public bully pulpit to advocate for what the public needs. The good news is, with a common sense core and a bunch of people on the bubble, that gives us a majority on city council to move forward with common sense plans.
Thanks, Craig. Also on your website, you mentioned the Recode LA rezoning project that's been going on for about 10 years now. Tell us a little bit more on how you would like to, once again, this is going to fall into city council's purview, but as mayor, you can use your bully pulpit. What are you going to do to really finalize that? That's tied to the downtown LA community plan. It'll be tied to every other community plans as they get updated. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it. It's a very complex zoning code. So, what's your idea to work with building and safety and city planning so that that new zoning code could actually be administered?
That's the reality of this, is that I am not stupid enough to go into every situation and say that I have an encyclopedic knowledge of every line of zoning code. I'm not stupid enough to go in and say, I alone can save Los Angeles, as some other candidates in this race will do. I have spoken to a number of folks who have been in and out of City Hall and in and out of land use and zoning and architects, folks that I have immense respect for, who are members of your organization, and who have expressed their support and donated to my candidacy, who will come in with me so that we can move this forward together. We have got to have private enterprise, and we've got to have communities at the table, and we've got to move forward rapidly with this. The process can be complex, but if you get the stakeholders in the room, there's no reason that you can't move forward quickly. I'll put this in concrete terms, right? If you can finalize a multi-billion-dollar merger that is 5 or 10 times Los Angeles' entire city budget, and you're finalizing 2 companies coming together in under 6 months to close a merger, then you can rewrite a zoning code in 18 months, right? The reality is that we have got to move forward with those stakeholders at the table, and we've got to do it by putting the burden on the city. One of the things that we do is we hide things from the public so that nobody can go to the hearings, nobody knows when the hearings are. We need to put the burden on the city and a budget for amplification so that the city is actually advertising its policies, advertising its deliberations, advertising what it's doing to the public to educate and engage them. Because if you're a single mother of 2 working 2 jobs just to keep your kids in school in your home, as 70% of Angelenos are, you don't have time to pay attention to this. So, in that vein, we have got to put the burden on the city to amplify and advertise to the public, to engage the community. We need to bring them together. We need to do that with experts, and we need to do it in under 18 months, or we're never going to be able to move forward. There is no reason that we should be working on something for 10 years and have little to no progress.
Thanks, Craig. Speaking of city planning and building and safety, your plan calls, or your proposal calls, to combine the departments. I don't know if you're aware, Mayor Villaraigosa explored this idea back in around 2011, 2012, and it was called the 12-2 initiative. Essentially, it went nowhere. When Mayor Garcetti became in office, they went back to the basics on development services. So, how will you, if you're elected mayor, how will you combine these 2 departments? Practically, how will you achieve that? Will it require city charter reform, and therefore a vote to the public, or like what's your on the ground way of achieving this? Because reorganizing the city departments, you're right, will be essential, but you have to do it in a way that is effective, and you gain the buy-in from the city personnel. So what opportunities do you see there?
Yeah. So I want to be very clear. I think that there are thousands of good, hardworking people in this city who get a bad rap because of poor leadership. When we talk about Villaraigosa and Garcetti, for all the things that they would like to do or have done in their administrations, they were hell bent on being Governor Villaraigosa and President Garcetti, and so they didn't actually leverage and move forward on anything that proved difficult or challenging. If there was opposition, it was a reason to stop. That's not my way. When I've gone into major corporations, I'll give you an example of this, right? I went going into Verizon, a company with 10 times the budget of Los Angeles. Their revenue is literally 10 times our annual budget. I had to bring people together and marshal forward solutions in real time, in the middle of crisis, in the middle of helping lead their pandemic response, creating programs that saved tens of thousands of small businesses when everybody's scrambling around, with departments that are not in communication with each other. And I never had the luxury of having my name on the side of the building, or even of having a position inside the company. I was always an outside global strategist. I had to bring people together based on the power of persuasion and the strength of my ideas. I'm the only candidate that has had to do that for multi-billion-dollar companies and multi-billion-dollar problems. So the reality is, when we empower city workers by showing them what we plan to do, by developing a plan with them involved in the development of that plan, and then rolling it out, saying, here's what it's going to look like, instead of trying to piecemeal it, and here's how it's going to operate, here's how it's going to make your life better. When we speak to our constituencies, then we can get their buy-in. Now, do I plan to clean house to the extent that the mayor can at the top of some of these organizations? Yes. There are some good people, but there are far more bad leaders than good leaders, because those employees, I've spoken to hundreds of city employees, do not feel empowered on a daily basis. They feel like the instruction is just to keep your head down and try not to cause trouble, because your boss is too interested in their promotion, whose promotion relies on a politician who's looking forward already to another office. That's not me. We've got to focus on doing the work on a concrete level. And that's where that comes into play. And it's with no sacred cows. We will need charter reform. We won't need charter reform, I think, to coalesce and to streamline our administration. I am advocating for a charter reform later that will do a whole lot of things, including breaking up LAUSD and bringing Department of Water and Power in under full city control, those types of things. And tripling the size of city council so that no city council member represents more than 100,000 people, removing the power of incumbency so that we create competitive elections once again. Those all things all require charter reform. Getting this city to build again does not. We've only built 13% of our housing capacity in the last 30 years. No one can tell me that is because the laws have stopped us. It's because career politicians have.
Thanks. So I have a couple more questions, and then we'll move on to Mel Wilson, and then we'll do a Q&A with the audience here. But tell us a little bit more, Craig, about this idea for the City Innovation Fund. This sounds super exciting, but is it possible? Where would the money come from? And how does it connect to the Clean Tech Incubator that's in the Arts District? And I'm just curious about this because it sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's something that doesn't get nearly enough talked about, right? Which is the opportunity for this city to create something that will allow us to cut taxes and increase social programs at the same time by generating an alternative source of revenue for the city and ensuring that jobs are based here. Let's start with what our end goal is, right? We need to bring more jobs and more good jobs to Los Angeles. And we need to do that. And I'm proposing the City Innovation Fund. We're proposing $100 million a year sourced into an ethical, transparent venture capital corporation where Los Angeles is investing in startups. So we are sending a message nationwide. If you want to start a business, come to Los Angeles because we've got the money for you. Expertly run, right? Independently run with full transparency and accountability and community management, not city management, community management. And oversight, right? But run by expert VC individuals that allows us to say, okay, where are we going to place our bets? who's going to do the most good for the city. And it's not just a calculation about profit, it's a calculation about profit and good for the city. And in exchange, we're going to waive, 10 years of the first 10 years of city taxes. We're going to take a seat on the board. So we're not just lobbying these corporations. We have an actual say in how they're run, so that the city is working as a partner with business to drive business and innovation. Where does the money come from? Listen, this town has lit $100 million on fire on a weekly basis to accomplish absolutely nothing. Right? I'm talking about $100 million a year out of an $11.8 billion budget. And particularly, I'm going to take it by removing the discretionary funds from every city council member. Every city council member has millions of dollars in discretionary funds, and they don't need it. Nobody needs another coffee mug with Kevin De Leon's name on it, or any other city council member's name on it, right? There is no reason for this. So we're going to start by removing discretionary funds and put them into the City Innovation Fund, a dedicated $100 million a year. So over the course of 10 years, you're talking about $1 billion invested. Imagine if we had taken stakes in Snap or stakes in other companies that have offices in Los Angeles. Imagine what they would be worth today, because those valuations 10 years down the road are going to generate revenue for this city that we can then leverage to build and to bring taxes down while increasing social programs. It is shocking to me that no city in America has done this, because there is a role model example for this. They're called sovereign wealth funds, and they exist across the world. We just don't do them, and we can legally do them here in Los Angeles. We just need to actually move forward on it.
Well, thank you for that. So, one last question is, your plan calls for the elimination of the gross receipts tax. This is something that AIA has been advocating for probably 15 years. Probably about 12 years ago, we made serious progress. It was almost implemented. Lloyd Greiwe, I don't know if you knew him or not. This is something that Mel Wilson was also involved with. How do we really make this a reality?
I am going to hammer this home until my voice gives out. It's nonsense. And the reality is, it hurts in the wrong places. It doesn't generate nearly enough revenue for the city to even be justifiable in any circumstance. But it is so arcane that everyday Angelinos don't understand it, right? And so there's no power of the public behind this. If we went out to every Angelino and we said, we're going to add an additional 1% tax on your income, on your gross income, and we looked at that, the public could be in the streets rioting. So the reality is, it is about public attention and awareness. We know that there are members of city council who want to move forward with the elimination of the gross receipts tax. We know that there are members who live on the bubble, who are willing to go where the wind blows. I intend to make sure that it is a hurricane force wind that I never shut up about until it actually gets done. And I will be there every step of the way, mobilizing the business community to support it. Because every business that you walk into should have a sign that says that they are being taxed, and then that explains exactly how it is, right? That exactly how gross receipts tax works, right? It's on gross receipts, not on profit. And we should be explaining that and building the power of the public to go along with that. This is not a hard job. This is just one that you have to focus on, right? And that's what ultimately the difference between me and any of my proposed predecessors when I become mayor is that I am only focused on being mayor. I am not focused on going anywhere else. I do not want to be a career politician. I was approached by competitors in this race asking me to drop out in exchange for becoming their deputy mayor and designated successors. If this is something you can hand down, this is not a monarchy. It's not an oligarchy. I am only interested in fixing this city. And that's why I spent the last several years reading 200,000 pages, doing 2,000 meetings with community stakeholders and organizations so that I can walk in there with the baseline knowledge that's necessary and the team that's necessary to get things done on day one. And with the relentless, diligent, listen, you don't dig yourself out of poverty so poor that you can't afford shoes unless you are willing to bang your head against the wall every single day until you break down that wall. I've been doing that since I was abandoned at the age of 14. I plan on doing that every single day as mayor.
Thanks, Craig. And for anyone that's on the call, the reason the gross receipts business tax is something that the AIA is interested in eliminating is because it unduly penalizes the architecture industry that's located in the city of LA. And that's also why you see so many firms located in Culver City or adjacent cities. It really, truly hurts firms that do international work. So But with that, Craig, we'll come back full circle with the Q&A with some additional people. But right now I want to switch over to Mel. So Mel Wilson, welcome to the call. We're really delighted that you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, AIA. I've worked with many of you over the years as a Metro board member 2 times. Also, we worked together on a number of different projects, including creating the transit-oriented community ordinance that is now on the books, where most of the development is going on. And I worked with you on the Business Tax Council, where we worked together with Lloyd Greiwe and myself and 7 other members, 3 of which were CPAs. I represented the housing industry. Lloyd was an investment banker. And we got so close. Mayor Garcetti told us that if we just obeyed the rules that he set forth, which was make sure whatever you do is revenue neutral. And we did. But unfortunately, when we came with a unanimous vote by our council to eliminate the business tax, and it was documented, that we could actually do this and still bring in more revenue than what was currently being brought in by the city through removing the tax for the businesses, and more robust revenue would come in from the sales tax volume that would be done in the business, also from real estate taxes as values went up and leaseholds went up. We knew we could do it, but unfortunately the mayor said that he'd have to talk to labor, and he was unable or unwilling to get labor to come along with him. So that was so disappointing after 4 years of hard work getting to that point, but we can get this done. I know we can.
Thank you, Mel. And you were one of the first people that reached out to the AIA, I would say almost 18 months ago, when you called me and said you were running for mayor. So, thank you for your diligence and your leadership. With your plan, your website, you explicitly link land use and housing to climate action. Can you share a little bit more on your vision, especially as it relates to the housing element update?
Yeah, I can. As you know, SCAG is requiring us to come up with 457,000 new units over the next 7+ years. It's going to be a heavy lift. But here's how I see it. Years ago, when Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa asked me to go on the Metro board for him, I initially told him no. I'm a guy who knows how to negotiate. So I had been on the Metro board 15 years earlier, but I resigned from the board after having a more important work to do to take care of my family, as I was doing all this work for Metro on a pro bono basis. So I told Mayor Villaraigosa, tell me what your plan is. He talked about Measure R. He talked about the subway to the sea and all those things. And I said, Mayor, there's 2 things you haven't talked about. I said, you haven't talked about connecting LAX to downtown, nor have you talked about building housing along transit corridors. So I negotiated with him. I said, look, if you want me to go on this board for you, here's what I expect you to do. You need to create a cabinet. And Will, your organization and many others served on that cabinet. We worked for 1.5 years. We came up with 170 tactics, many of which are now being used by builders who are building in our city. And essentially it gives more ability to build along transit corridors. Instead of just doing it around a transit station, we looked at the entire corridors, 1/2 mile on each side. And so I believe that we can get this done, because it's when you're building along transit corridors, it's much easier to lift than trying to build all these housing new development units next to single family neighborhood communities, because the neighborhood groups are very strong, as you know, and most of the city council members are very weak. And so the neighborhood councils and the neighborhood homeowner groups will win almost every time in that argument. And so by building it along transit corridors, we're saying that we're going to build it where less people live now, but we want it to encourage more development where we would have less trips generated, fewer carbon emissions generated, and we can get higher heights. We can do a lower floor area ratio. We can get a lot of things done that we would not normally be able to do. But at the same time, we could ask for the developers to build housing that's affordable. And I have a tool. My tool is land use, but also my tools is the impact fees. You all know that the impact fees in LA City ranges anywhere from $50,000 to $60,000 based on the Turner Center for the housing development. And what they've shown us is that in LA, if we could waive those fees or defer some of those fees to allow builders to build with the condition that they bill for the very low income. So we can meet this threshold of 116,000 units, that they could build for low income, so that we can meet the threshold of approximately 70,000 units. So we can build for the workforce, which nobody talks about. Nobody talks about worker housing. Everybody talks about homelessness. And the reality is that the workers are carrying the biggest load, and we need to create housing that's affordable for our workforce. And when I talk about workforce housing, I'm talking about household incomes that go up to about 150 to 170% AMI, so that folks who are actually working can actually afford to buy a house or rent an apartment in our city. And I have a down payment assistance program, which I used to be the broker for the housing department of the city of LA. I know that we can let a buyer buy with 1% down, and the city comes up with 20% as a down payment, and the owner owns 80% of the equity. And this could build generational wealth for a lot of our workers who we are losing. You know, when I did my master's degree 6 years ago, my thesis was on how do you create housing that's affordable for middle-class workers and millennials in LA. And so what I discovered was that we lost almost 1 million people in a decade, and most of them are young people who are making $100,000 household income. They left because they just could not afford the housing. People are leaving this city and this region, not so much because of all the income taxes, but moreover because of the housing costs is just no longer affordable. So they're moving to states that are neighboring states like Arizona, Nevada. They're moving to Oregon, not so much anymore. They're moving to Texas, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, places like that where the housing is much more affordable. So I believe in changing behavior, and the way you get neighborhood groups to work with you, you have to have integrity in the planning process. Currently, after Measure S was defeated, and I was fighting a hard fight, and we won that battle on Measure S that would have stopped all the development for 2 years in our city. What we were able to do was get the city to agree to a minimum of 6-year updates on community plans, because prior to that, there was no integrity in the community plan process. Everything was being done by plan amendments. So I know how this system works. I've worked in it for 35 years as a housing advocate for the largest real estate trade association in this region. I have a master's degree in how to create housing that's affordable. And I know how to work with the elected officials. I know that we're not going to throw them all out. We'd like to throw some of them out for sure, but we have to figure out how to work with them. And here's my strategy. My strategy is to bring them along and ask what their opinions are, what their ideas are. And then I tell them what my ideas are. And if they're unwilling to go along with what I believe is what's going to work, I'm going to go directly to their constituents and let their constituents know that they're standing in the way of their kids and grandkids getting a house or getting an apartment. And so that's how we work this. It's not easy. It's a tough lift, but we can get this done.
So Mel, thanks. You just answered a lot of my questions because I had them all lined up for you, but you just went right through them. So let's spend a little bit more time on this. What you call My Housing Wealth Creation Program.
Yes.
I think this goes hand in hand with a lot of the initiatives that the AIA is doing. Especially, we have a board director named Michael Anderson who's working on a similar proposal. Dig into that a little bit more. But before you do, the California Housing Finance Agency has a program that they just unleashed in April, where a homeowner, a first-time home buyer can have a down payment, a loan for their down payment of up to 10% of the house, the mortgage. So they use that 10%, but you referenced this, but here's the catch. They can only make 80% of the area mean income. That means that they're making 68 grand a year or less. And that means they're bringing home about 4,000 after taxes per month. But if the area median income price of a house in LA County is 800 grand or so, that comes out to be about a $5,000 a month mortgage. So, how does your housing creation program work, knowing that this is a mix-up? Because if you're limiting the income to like the way the interest rates are now, it's just not feasible. It's a program that no one can utilize. So how could you make your program work?
I think it's great if you're in the San Joaquin Valley, or if you're in Victorville or someplace like that. But we're talking about LA City, where the median price of a home is $1 million now. And so that program won't work. That's why I say you have to go higher. You have to go 150, 170% average medium income. And that will give us a better shot. And I'm talking about a down payment as high as 20%. So I've looked at the numbers. I think we can make it work with those numbers. And it's going to cost an investment on the city's part, but it's an investment in our future. It's an investment in keeping our intellectual talent here in our city, because a lot of our talent is leaving. They're just leaving, and we have to invest in them to get them to stay. And it's going to be good for businesses too. So I don't believe the CalHFA program is suited for LA. I mean, because the median price of a condominium today is close to $600,000. So it makes it real tough in LA. So what I say is that my plan has a much more viable way of getting people out of the apartments, out of overcrowded conditions. And we know during COVID, a lot of folks who suffered the most were living in overcrowded conditions. And so we have to help folks get out of those overcrowded conditions by giving them a hand in the whole deal. And what we do is we put up to as much as 20% down payment. But what we ask the homeowner to do, or the condo owner to do, is when they refinance or when they sell the property, that they have to give back 20% of the equity, whatever that amount is at the time that the sale occurs or the time that refinance occurs. Those dollars will be going back into the pot, so that future home buyers will be able to use those dollars as values increase. And if the values decrease, then the city loses out. But at the end of the day, it's a better deal for our city than the CalHFA program.
Thanks, Mel. You mentioned on your website too about deferring and waiving the housing production fees from the planning from city planning and building and safety. Are you really talking about the affordable housing impact fees, or are you also talking about the fees to get the permits?
Well, there's both. The fees that we have, the affordable housing linkage fee, which goes from $12 to $18 a square foot, depending on what community the property is located in that you want to build. We're talking about building fees also. If you add them all up together, it comes up to be $50,000 to $60,000, depending upon where the housing unit is being built. I look at the Quimby fees. The Quimby fees is something that I want to hold on to, because I want to have more tree canopy. I want to be able to have more parks. I want to be able to do more open space. So the Quimby fees, we might want to leave those alone, because they are going to provide a better climate change effect for us than if we got rid of the Quimby fees. But I'm willing to look at deferring fees if the builder builds a smaller price point. And this is where your industry comes in. I think a lot of times we're building units that are much too large. I look at a lot of young people. They don't collect all this junk that older people collect. They want a space where they can have a unit that may be 350 to 600 square feet, and they're just happy with that, and give them an area for them to walk their four-legged friend and to do their jogging and walking and cycling. They're happy campers. So I think it's going to require a lot of creative design from your industry on how to build a smaller, but build better, and build it where it looks and feels bigger. We all know that we have some things that are out of our control. One is we cannot control the cost of materials. We know, because of climate change and the fires that are taking up a lot of our lumber and the steel and metal that we're having to pay for, and the disruptions that we have, and the distribution of cargo. We know that those are costs that are kind of out of our control. But we know this: if you're building something, for example, that costs $300 a square foot, well, if you're building something that's 900 square feet, that's a certain price point. But if you're building something that's 600 square feet, you can build more. And so you still have the same building cost per square foot. You're just building smaller. So I think we can be more creative. We can require less parking. If we do this along transit corridors, we won't get as much pushback from neighborhood groups who will put all the pressure on the city council members who really are unwilling to fight and educate them about the need.
Thanks, Mel. So let's shift the conversation to community plans. You've advocated on your proposal here that if the city falls short of updating a community plan within 6 to 10 years, the city will not be able to approve construction of anything more than 200 units. Tell us a little bit more about that, and whether or not you think that might potentially backfire, because then that development's not happening because the community plan's out of date, or like how do you address this?
Well, you know, it's putting some teeth in the ordinance and the community planning process. My belief is that if you're the mayor, you set your priorities. Your budget is your list of priorities. My belief is that what we have to do is we have to staff up on the planning department right now. We don't have enough planners, and we certainly do not have enough clerical people who are supporting the planners. How do I know? Because I meet with the planning people and they tell me all the time they have stacks and stacks of projects sitting on their desks that they haven't been able to get to because they don't have the clerical support to get it done. And so I find out why is that? Well, personnel, they don't have enough personnel to screen to people. It's really silly stuff, common sense stuff. So the mayor has to look at this and say, look, I'm going to fund more for the clerical support. I'm going to fund more for the professional planners so that we can get these projects done on time and we can get community plan updates. So I'm talking about, I gave myself a window of 6 to 10 years to do that. You know, that's far better than what it used to be, which was 15 to 20 years before they updated the community plan. I think it puts enough pressure on the city to step forward and do what they need to do, but also gives enough leeway for us to move forward and get projects approved and get community plan updates on a reasonable time frame.
Thank you, Mel. With the idea of community plans, I've always thought that you could front load the expense with the value capture and use that value capture to pay for the update. And have you considered anything like that before?
Yeah, here's what I thought of. I thought of, you know, one of the areas that slows the process down, they use SQL as their main tool to fight things. And so what my belief is that we need to allow a community plan that would have an environmental study for the entire planning area. And why do you want to do it this way? Because what's happening now is you're hitting builders. Every builder that comes in and builds over a certain threshold, they have to do their own environmental study. And you know what happened? It gets bogged down before you know it. If the builder doesn't have enough money, they can't fight the fight and they end up abandoning the project. So if we said we're going to have a master plan environmental planning process. And so we'll do an environmental planning process that will last for 10 years. We know that, you know, the RENA numbers, they go for 9 years or so. So a 10-year update and a plan that's good for that long, and you come in as a builder, you can piggyback on an existing environmental plan instead of having to do your own environmental plan yourself. Maybe you have to do some traffic studies to do some minute work, but not the whole environmental study, because that's where the homeowner groups and the NIMBYs and the folks who don't want anything new will fight you every step of the way. So I think the creative way is to have a master plan, EIR, EIS, so that everyone can know what the rules are, they can play by the same rules, and the homeowners know that this is the rule, but also the builders know what this is the rule, and they can know, they assess what kind of risk they want to take.
Thank you. With regards to, you know, the housing element update that you referenced and the need to really make sure that this affordable housing is located citywide, what are your strategies to work with? For instance, you live in the Valley, correct? You know, how do you work with your community to, you know, inspire them to accept more affordable housing in their neighborhoods?
Well, you know what I've done? I've learned to just hit people and talk to people on their personal level. And here's what I'm finding out. You know, about 4 or 5 years ago, I put together a Housing Our Workers Forum. And I think the AIA was a part of that forum. I brought in multiple cities. I brought in Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. I had the governor's office, Ben Metcalf come. I had, you know, a couple of nonprofits come. I had Mercedes Marquez, who had been the Secretary of HUD, former general manager of housing and community development for our city, community investment department for our city. And so I had a number of players there, but I also had neighborhood groups. I had, you know, Sandy Brown from the Westwood neighborhood groups and the Holmby Hills neighborhood groups. I had several neighborhood owners, leaders who came, and here's what we discovered. They got enlightened. They realized that every time they fight a housing project, that means that their grandkids and their kids are not going to get to live near them. And so I remember very clearly when we finished this project, I sat down with Sandy and I said, Sandy, what did you learn? She says, I don't want my grandkids to move away from me, so I guess I better be a little bit more open to development, because if I'm not, my kids are going to take my grandkids away and I'm going to be really upset. And so I think you have to take people and right where they're at and hit it on their personal level when they realize that their kids, their grandkids will not be able to live near them, particularly as they're aging and they need the care for their kids and their grandkids, you know, they're going to be more open to doing this and working with us. So you have to educate people. We had an urgency, and that was measure S. The urgency was that if we don't do something and educate people, you know, we're going to have everybody go along with putting a moratorium on all development, which would have been a disaster for our region, you know, for a period of time. So a large part of it really is just educating people, bringing it down to the basics, getting experts who can help them see what the real numbers are. And when we did that, we worked with BizFed Institute, we worked with the Southland Regional Realtors, AIA, and a number of other groups. And we brought labor groups involved with us. We had LA Unified School District, Caprice Young, and other folks. We brought all these different players who were a part of why we should have more affordable housing, and particularly workforce housing. And you know what? It really worked.
Thank you, Mel. So we have, you know, one more question for you, and then we'll have a Q&A with both you and Craig. Spend a little more time with us on your climate action plan, and connect that to you know, zero emission vehicles, but also 100% electric for all commercial construction. You know, what opportunities do you see there to sort of work with phasing out natural gas?
Well,
they're like right here in our backyard.
What I want to do, you know, it's multi-prong approach. We know that the largest generators of carbon emissions, greenhouse gases, is transportation. So we start with that. You know, we look at cars, trucks, buses, ships, planes, and trains. We can't control so much on the plane part because that's the federal government that does that. But the other issues we certainly can do something about. When I was on the Metro board in the 1990s, we made a tough call. We decided to get rid of diesel buses and methanol buses, and we cleaned up our environment. You know, we had so many less smog alert days as a result of us taking 2,000 buses off the streets every day that was killing our kids and killing our older people. And so my belief is that by going into the next level, which is, you know, as the mayor of our city, I'll have the most influence on the Metro board than any other person. And so what I've learned when I served on the Metro board, the 8 years I did, was it's basic arithmetic. Learn how to count to 7. There's 13 board members. We start out with 4. All I have to do is get 3 more. And that's what I was able to do when I was on the Metro board before for Reardon and for Viragosa. I always figured out, how do we come up with 7? And even you may not have the same 3 that you need to come up with that 7 on each issue, but you can still come up with it. So we're going to convert all our buses. We're going to convert all the access transit vehicles. Metro funds all of that to zero emission fuels. That's what we're going to do. And then we're going to go to DOT. DOT has a couple hundred buses. We're going to convert all those buses to zero emissions fuel use. We're going to go to DWP. We're going to say, DWP, you're owned by the city. We're going to ask you and instruct you, and it's done by the general manager and by the policymakers, the commissioners who I get to appoint on DWP's commission on boards. And so what I'll say to them is that we're going to offer discounted rates for people who charge their vehicles, their vehicle is registered in the city of LA. So instead of you paying the normal charging rate, we're going to offer you a reduced charging rate. And that's going to give you more of an incentive to convert to a zero fuel or an electric vehicle. So we do those kind of things. We go to the harbor. We know that our harbor area, I've been in Watts and Willowbrook and San Pedro multiple times in the last month, and they have the dirtiest air in our region. And so we have to start out with the ships. You know, we have the ships that are bringing in all this cargo, which we are the busiest cargo container portal in the nation. So we have to tell these ships, you know what, you can't come in our harbor. We're going to give you so many years to phase out of these heavy diesel fuel vehicles and these trucks, and all the trucks that are coming in down the Alameda corridor and all these trucks that go in and out. We're going to take them and tell them, look, you're going to have to get rid of this fuel source. We're going to tell you what fuel source to use. If electric works, if hydrogen works, if fuel cells work, you figure it out. But we'll let the private sector figure it out. We'll just give them timelines that they have to do it on, and we'll take all the cranes and we'll change them to zero emission fuel uses too. This is going to help us a lot. But some of the other things we have to do, which is really common sense, it doesn't cost us much money. We change behavior. What we do is we start staggering the workforce. We know that out of this COVID process, a lot of people learned that they could work from the home. And so we can tell businesses, look, you work from home. We want to encourage you to have your workers work from home so many days of the week. And so that will have less traffic on our highways and freeways and the roads and surface. It's going to save us more money on the maintenance side on these on these roads that people are traveling, but also it's going to help us clean up the air. So we have multiple ways of doing it. When I was doing my master's, we look at LEED certified buildings. This is the proper way to go. This is how we do it. We start telling buildings that, look, we want to design buildings where you can generate your own energy on site, so that we don't have to take all this imported energy and doing all this work where we're transporting, fossil fuels to generate a power plant. Even if it's out of state, we don't want to contribute to, the negative effects of climate change. So we do these kind of things. We get to a point where in 2032, we're zero emission fuels from all of DWP sources. This is not an easy lift, but it requires money and it requires a commitment. And I know that altogether, we're going to save our planet. And I'll tell you what I'm finding out as I do focus groups around our city. The kids are terrified. These young people have college degrees. They are petrified that they won't have a planet 15 years down the road. They're looking at the effects of climate change, the fires, all the weather changes that are going on, and they are concerned, and rightly so. So we need to help them know that they have a future, because many of them are mentally ill as a result of the fact that they've went to college, got their degree, can't get a job that pays them the kind of money, can't live in a place outside of their parents' place, and they're committing suicide. They're leaving our state. They're leaving our city. So these are the kind of things. It's a multi-pronged effect of doing it, but we have to do that. We have to do what is I call congestion pricing, which is basically telling people, look, you use the highways and at a peak hour, we're going to charge you for it, but we also have to make sure there's equity, that poor and low income communities have to be able to get through those travel ways too, without having all the money. So we have to make amends for people who don't make the kind of money that a lot of other folks make, and also allow them to participate in congestion pricing, but not have to take it out of their own budget.
Thank you, Mel. That's quite a bit of information. We really look forward to learning more about your proposals. Let's go to both of you now. I'm going to have Hava, who is the chair of the AIA Government Outreach Committee. She's going to join. And we also have Tracy Stone, another co-chair of the Government Outreach Committee, and hopefully she'll be able to be involved.
Hey, Tracy.
So Hava, welcome to the call.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not yet the chair. Tracy is currently the co-chair, and I'm slated to be next year. But I always have a lot of questions. So, I have a question, and I'm going to frame it for, I guess, Mel first, and then Craig. It's a similar but different question, because obviously your ideas are quite different. But, the biggest problem in Los Angeles one of the big problems is that we get all of these incredibly idealistic people with a lot of great ideas wanting to run for mayor, running for mayor, getting elected to mayor, and we have this really weak mayor. And in different ways, they get more done, less done, but, people get stymied by the system, right? And
Right.
so one of the questions I have for you, Mel, I wanted to compliment you. I could not agree more than that building affordable workforce housing is an ongoing challenge. It's not a one-time deal. It's not a problem to be solved and then walked away from. We have to commit as a society to an ongoing basis, subsidizing, assisting, finding ways to help get that kind of housing built if the market doesn't produce it naturally. And we have to keep doing it. Otherwise, we're just going to be back here. So I really appreciate that vision. But again, a couple of the things you mentioned are things that I would love to see done, and I don't see any way that a mayor can do them. So for instance, the idea of a general ERA for a community, even an entire community plan area, although even small parts of a community plan area, that would just be in effect and everybody building in that area could plug into it. is such a brilliant idea. How does that happen with all of the people who are just married to using CEQA to get their voices heard on other things that they haven't been able to get their voices heard on?
Well, thank you. SQL has been the big tool that they've used to stop projects. And the reality is that a lot of folks, when you make it personal and talk about how this is going to impact their daily life, but more importantly, their kids and their grandkids, they become a little more softer to it. I don't believe there's a will at the state level to really significantly modify CEQA. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. So how do we do it locally? What we do is we have to make sure there's integrity in the planning process. And for a long time, there was not. When you're updating a community plan every 15 to 25 years, there's no integrity there when everything's been done by a plan amendment. But when you start out with the process and you make the neighborhood councils more robust, what do I mean by that? Get people more engaged early on, educate them. Like right now, I was at a neighborhood council board meeting recently, and they had cut the budget from the neighborhood council from 50,000 when it first started under Mayor Reardon to like in the 30s. And so I think you have to give people more ability to get engaged, use their mobile device to get engaged. And so letting people be a part of the process from the outset instead of at the back end, this makes a lot more sense. I know when I work with communities and they want to know that there's fairness and equity, they want to be on the ground floor. They don't want to be there when you already got your project approved and you got your renderings in place. Right. It's too late. It's too late. You got to start early with them. And so what you say to them is, look, we're going to build for the future. We know that we want to update the plan every 20 years, for example, per the state code, but we're going to do it every 10 years. And so we want to work on a 10-year plan where the environmental process we'll put in things where there'll be caveats, but overall we're saying that we can build out and we can plan out for the infrastructure, for the water, the sewage, for the power, all the different things that we have and the transportation for the next 10 years. And I think it's a hard sell, but it's not an impossible sell. Most of the people I interact with, they just want to be heard. And what's been happening so often, I was in Eagle Rock last week, and people were so upset because Metro's putting a BRT down their neighborhood without involving the community. And they're like, wow, they're really upset. I was in Watts over the weekend, and folks in Watts are saying, our council member never shows up. We call him No Show Joe because he never shows up. So what we have to do is we have to get people engaged early and let them feel like they have a part of the stakeholders process. And when we do that, I think we can get them to go along with the 10-year EIR. And this way, it's not nickel and diming people and stopping projects that are good from ever being able to see the light of day.
Right. I agree. All right. So Craig, thank you. So Craig, similar but different question, which is that, a lot of your ideas are based on just smashing heads in City Hall, right? And it's music to my ears. Right? I'm not objecting. We're just going to beat up on the planning department today. Your comments about Recode, my critique of Recode is different but similar. It's definitely taken too long, but it is also, when I finally first saw Downtown LA 2040, I mean, Will can tell you, I was beside myself. I've been on quite a few meetings with them. Like, why are we talking about windowsill depths and matching 19th century buildings when we have a housing crisis? Why, are you telling people that they need to build in brick in 2022 and none of this stuff meets climate change goals? And where did this come from? And who are you? Who do you think you are? So my question to you is, people are empowered. The people that you say, I'm just going to get building and planning together and they're just going to be one organization, and DWP, they're just going to do what I say. And, these people are quite empowered. And so my question is, how do we accomplish things other than requiring a kind of Patton's March that may or may not be able to be pulled off.
Patton's March or Sherman's March to the Sea.
Sherman's March to the Sea, yeah.
Listen, when you are, I'm not telling y'all anything you don't already know, but when you're going into a room, you need to be willing to have no sacred cows, but the knowledge of your willingness and your willingness to use every tool at your disposal is what moves you forward without actually having to use those tools. I've had hundreds of people work for me. I've never had to fire a single individual. They simply understood when it was time to go. And in the entirety of a workforce of 50,000 people at the parent company that I worked for, my division had the lowest turnover rate of any division globally, because I was able to empower individuals to move forward and believe in a singular-minded vision by focusing on what brings us together, by building out from common ground. You need to be willing to shred. The mayor, there's a little known city charter provision, right? In that one mayoral administration cannot bind another in agreements. They just all end up accepting the previous administration's agreements. You need to be able to show up to the table with every agreement in a paper shredder. Doesn't mean it's right or smart to shred every agreement between the city and the county, but they need to know that that's your starting position. We have coddled and catered to these institutions and individuals for fear of upsetting them, because nobody wanted to upset the next person because they might need them for their senatorial bid, or they might need them for the gubernatorial bid. I have no such interests, right? I have no such sacred cows. But it is also not just about bashing heads together. It is about collaborating first with the knowledge on the back end that we will find a way to work together, or we will all drown together, right? This is the reality. Unless people have to pay the consequences of their decisions, they have no incentive to move forward. So let's all get in the same boat and let's start drilling holes. One way or another, we'll figure out how to repair the boat. The reality is we've got to be in that boat together. When I went into what is now a defunct division of Verizon called Go90, they had started Quibi before Quibi. There were 3 divisions openly at war with each other in a $5 billion entity. The running joke was that the only thing that those 3 divisions agreed on was that they liked me, and that I had the plan for all of them to move forward together, right? If I can do that in every organization that I've gone into, right? Not just Verizon and Go90, but every organization I've gone into, where I can find people who are diametrically opposed to that. I'll take my affordability plan. I didn't just build my affordability plan that's written on the website out of nothing. I sat down with 200 individuals and stakeholders from across the city. I sat down with members of the DSA, who I don't share a whole lot of common ground with. And I sat down with some of the largest property owners, mom and pop property owners, and some of the largest property owners, some of the largest developers, general contractors, architects. I sat down with 200 different individuals and organizations. And when I finally hammered out what is written on my website, I sent it back out to all of them. And I'll tell you this, one of the largest property owners in Los Angeles agreed with 99% of the plan, and so did the DSA representatives. If I can get the largest property owners in Los Angeles to agree on an affordability, on 99% of an affordability plan with the Democratic Socialists of America, that's leadership. That's bringing people together, right? And that is the track record that I have. It's the track record I have in building policy, and it's the track record I have in getting that policy done. So sure, do I love to make sure that everyone knows that we will move forward? There is no other option. Yes. But do I want everyone to feel the empowerment moving forward? I mean, let's be honest about this. How long have the people of this city been starved for anything resembling common sense and leadership? How long have city employees been starved of joy in their jobs? Find me, like I feel like I'm standing outside Sodom and Gomorrah and it's saying, find me 10 people inside city government who feel joy about their job. Now that sounds ludicrous to say, but it's true. When people are empowered and happy at their job, empowered to do the right things, to feel like they're helping people, this city is not run by a bunch of anarchists and a bunch of sadists who want to hurt people. People genuinely want to make life better in this city. So let's tap into those better angels. That's leadership. Leadership is not just, can you craft an encyclopedic policy? Can you craft a whole team that's going to bring this together? Leadership is making people feel good about moving forward on the things that are going to help other people. And that I have a track record of doing for 20 years for companies with market valuations over $300 billion. So I'm well prepared to do that in an organization with an $11.2 billion budget and only, or soon to be 11.8, and only tens of thousands of employees.
Hava, thank you for the great questions. We're going to put on Tracy Stone now. Tracy, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. And I do have to apologize for being late. You know, you get your head buried in work, and I'm so sorry I looked up and realized what time it was. So thank you. But what I've heard so far is very inspiring. And I hope I'm not reiterating anything you've already discussed, but I was curious about the topic of infrastructure. And there's many aspects to it. Some of them I actually had an opportunity to hear Craig talk about this a little bit the other day, but you know, as I think you both are aware, that right now the city kind of relies on development to upgrade infrastructure as needed. And so an early development project in an area might bear a disproportionate cost of or burden of upgrading the infrastructure in terms of sewer, water, and various things. And at the same time, I think there's a lot of concern on the part of neighborhoods that the CEQA process doesn't take into account the cumulative effects on infrastructure of certain developments or a series of developments in an area. And so I wondered if either of you or both of you could talk a little bit about if developers don't have to bear the burden of infrastructure, and if the city were to take it on in a more robust fashion that would address some of these concerns, how would you fund it? How would we do it? And secondly, I guess, is how do you also sell the process of upgrading infrastructure on our streets to accommodate more bikes, make it more pedestrian friendly, which at the same time runs the risk of reducing maybe speed of traffic, flow of traffic, and has in the past, I think, caught up a lot of these plans that had great intentions. So I'll leave that kind of broadly out there as a general topic of infrastructure.
Thank you, Tracy. Mel, do you want to start first?
Sure. Well, I can say nice meeting you, Tracy. And don't worry, if you live in LA, we're used to people being late. Traffic, you can blame it on the traffic. But you know, here's what I see with respect to infrastructure. There, you know, the main parts of it really is the water. We know the Department of Water and Power is owned by our city, and they have an ongoing schedule of changing the trunk lines and the water main lines. And so that's been happening now. They're probably doing a couple 100 miles a year or something like that. So we have that one in place for as far as the water transportation. As far as water itself, that's a different story. And I can talk about that too. You know, as far as water and where do we get the water from? You know, I've taken water tours from Metropolitan Water District, from Department of Water and Power. And I know that the majority of our water is transported. I would say much more than majority, probably 80% of our water comes from 200 miles away, 240 miles away. And those water sources are really being depleted because, you know, climate change is happening and it's really destroying the environment, you know, 200 miles away from us. And so that's a challenge that we have to be facing with. I have some ideas on how to solve some of those problems. We also know that infrastructure, that voters have voted at least 4 times that I've been around. You know, I think Prop A, Prop C, Measure M, and Measure R for public transit dollars. And so we have a pretty good handle on, I think, public transit dollars, but we're not using the MTA as a tool to really drive more housing along transit corridors and changing behavior, transportation demand services that will be able to manage our highways and roads and streets at a better way than we currently are, because most of the elected officials that I served with on Metro, be it a county supervisor or a mayor from a city or our own city, they really get off on, ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings. They don't get off on, well, let's manage this highway and put metering on the freeway. They don't get off on that at all. They want to go where they can, take a photo op and get reelected again. But I think that some of the basic things that we can do is manage our infrastructure better with respect to the highways. The sewer issues, we know we've had multiple breakage in our sewer lines, the Hyperion plant. We've seen some devastating things that have happened to our sewer system. So that's something that really we have to educate the public and let them know, hey, if we don't do something about this, your sewage is going to back up on you. And so that may end up having to be something that voters have to go to the ballot and vote for, just as they did for the transportation improvements that voters have done. I believe that once you educate the voters and they see that there's really a need and they believe that you're going to do right with it, they go along with it. I mean, we're paying 2 cents out of the 10 cents or 9 point whatever cents sales tax now for public transit. Why is that? Because people see there's a great need and they were educated in a way, but they were disappointed in some ways, but educated, and they see infrastructure, they see rail systems, they see bus systems, they see improvements. So when they can see that it's being done right, they go along with it. But at the same time, if you look at Measure HHH, they don't see the results. I supported Measure HHH. I got the real estate community to agree to taxing themselves, which is almost impossible to do as an advocate, to get your organization to go against their core beliefs, which is a sales tax. But we did it because we were told that 10,000 new housing units was going to be built. Well, people don't believe us anymore. So I cannot go along with that kind of an infrastructure investment or a tax or a fee for that. I'm not in favor of any kind of fee for homelessness and all that, because people have been told too many times and they just don't believe it's going to work. So we have to manage that better. And part of our system really is, you look at the power grid. We have to do a better job of generating other sources of power. Wind is a source that we can use. I don't believe we can desalinate because it's so expensive, but maybe we can use wave technology, get waves that move every day. Maybe we can generate energy through using wave and solar, and fuel cells is one way, but it leaves environmental hazardous material behind. So, it's going to be a challenge, Tracy, but I think we just have to always, here's what I told myself from the very beginning on this campaign trail. I'm going to always tell the truth. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to engage the voters. And that's what I've been doing. If you'll notice, when I was fortunate enough to get on the debate stage, I did that. I told the truth. I had fun. People laughed, and they said, oh, this guy's really down to earth, right? And I engage the voters. I get their attention. And so that's what we have to do as a leader of our city. You have to be a leader, and leaders have to tell the truth. People don't like it, but they'd rather have the truth than you give them something that's far from the truth or not quite the truth. And they find out later, then they lose all faith in you. So it requires leadership and it requires bringing people together. I've worked with these council members, multiple sets of council members over the last 30 years. And here's what's one thing that's common about them. They all want to get elected again. For the most part, the only one I saw that didn't was a guy named Greg Smith, who decided, I'm not going to take on my third term. But we see the corrupt behavior that's going on with 3 of our council members that got indicted, which is really a sad commentary on our city, how insiders are getting it done. And I look at, the guy who's spending $20 million now, he's blaming everybody else for corruption. And he's part of the ones that fed the corruption because he got all his projects approved by using the system, right? And now he's pointing fingers at other people. So, so much for the negative things. But overall, I think we just have to show leadership and be transparent. When you make a mistake, own up to it. That's it. You own up to it. You tell people the truth. And when you make a mistake, just tell people, you know what? I was right. I was wrong. You were right.
Thank you, Mel. Craig, do you want to take a moment to respond to Tracy's question?
Yeah, I think Mel and I share common ground in just being honest, right? And being truthful with the public. The city's leadership has been so focused on projecting an air of strength, an air of confidence and superiority, and just always having the answer that they've spoken out when they didn't have the answer, right? And I'll use a non-architectural building example for this, but what should have happened at the beginning of COVID was for the city and county leadership to sit down with the public and say, all right, here's the deal. We don't know what this is. We're going to give you some regulations and restrictions. We understand that this is unprecedented and this is onerous. If we don't do this, you will die. If we do this, fewer of you will die. And we'll come back to you as soon as we have information. Because, by the way, that's what my friends who work in epidemiology for the US government knew and said at the time to me, right? It wasn't bend the curve, stay home, and this is going to be over in 3 weeks. No, it was project an air of certainty and honesty, or an air of certainty and completeness. No, be transparent with the public, build trust and faith in the public. As Mel rightfully points out, the government of Los Angeles has lost the confidence of the public completely and totally. Now, when it comes down to our needs, we also have to understand where the public's coming from and what they have an appetite to digest. I am a fan, as anyone who has attended any of my town halls knows, of talking about the fact that 90% of the pipes in the city are in imminent danger of breaking. And in case of an earthquake, this city will be unlivable for years because there aren't enough plumbers in America to fix every pipe that we're going to break in a major earthquake if it's anywhere near central Los Angeles, right? The reality is that having a $44 million annual pipe repair budget when you need $28 billion of repairs just to replace the pipes that are over 80 years old is non-functional and non-working. Now you try to have that conversation with the public and their response is, I can't even get vegetables at the grocery store that aren't rotten, right? What is the public's appetite and where do you have those conversations with them? Always be honest, but also leadership is being able to be leaders and to make decisions because we live in a republic, not a democracy, where a democratic republic, where we are expected to build the trust of our constituents and to make decisions on their behalf and to educate them about what decisions we're making and why we're making them. As anyone can rightfully tell you, we've raised taxes more times than anyone can count in recent years. And now everyone in this city is looking around saying, what am I getting for this? And now Los Angeles has lost population for the first time in its history. We all know the economics of this situation. 15% of Angelenos and Californians supply more than 80% of the city and the state's budget. If we lose even 1% of those individuals, it sends us into an economic death spiral that makes Detroit of the 90s look like child's play. We cannot afford to lose population. We cannot afford to continue to have the eradication of trust. So we've got to start by being honest, and we've got to start by educating the public, but we've got to start by meeting the public where they are. The average Angeleno reads at a 4th grade reading level, right? Let's think about that for a minute. They are pulled in a million directions and they can't even get fresh fruit at a local grocery store. And we want to talk to them about a $28 billion pipe problem that they're not going to realize until there's an earthquake that destroys everything. And then suddenly half the city can't get water or sewage out. And then they're going to turn and say, well, why didn't you fix this? And we're going to say, well, the public didn't have an appetite for it, so we just didn't address it. Well, that's what we're saying about homelessness, isn't it? Homelessness has been with us for decades. Make no mistake, the only reason we're talking about it now is because it finally crept into the backyards of wealthy donors who now won't shut up about it to their representative who's running for mayor, right? That's why we're talking about this. So leaders need to lead. We need to make difficult decisions. Yes, we need to educate the public, but sometimes we just need to move forward. Now, that in the case of infrastructure, we have all the money in the world right now. We should be taking advantage of how much money we have. If we just make the right decision, when we make the right decision, when I am mayor, with the only plan, the only written, published plan based on proven success to eliminate and eradicate homelessness, that restores $3 billion annually to the city's budget. We do not need extra money. We need to spend our money correctly. And that's my answer when it says, well, where's the money going to come from? Because we should not hold developers hostage for the next 30 years of whatever that's going to look like. That's unconscionable. That is the city's responsibility, and we have the money to deal with it.
Thank you, Craig. So Tracy and also Hava, do you have any additional, I want to make sure I respect everyone's time here.
Sure. I actually, while they were talking, I was thinking about a topic that is maybe not that sexy, but I was just curious if either of you have any interest in looking at or pursuing alternate ways of handling our waste water in a desert climate. As Mel noted, we obviously have an issue with a shortage of water, and they're doing so many interesting things in places like China with water reclamation projects that can be quite beautiful, but obviously quite expensive. And I was just curious whether either of you are looking at that or have any plans for rethinking our current systems.
Yeah, 100%. Mel, I don't know if you want to go first. I know Mel and I have differing ideas. Mel, I don't know if you want to go first. You want me to?
Whichever you prefer.
All right, so
I'm happy to talk. I've looked at the wastewater treatment that we have, and I believe that we need to. I know we need to set a goal of when we're going to achieve 80 to 90% of recovery of all our wastewater and put it back into the system to percolate our ground. And one of the ways, it's not just wastewater, Tracy, but also it's groundwater, which stormwater runoff and rainwater. We don't get a lot of rain these days, but when we do, it comes in large quantities. And one of the things that I want to do is go away from, for example, on the groundwater, and I'll go back to wastewater, but go away from concrete hard pavement and have pavement that are more permeable, so that the water that we do get can actually percolate below and go into the ground table that we have. We know we have aquifers in some parts of our city. We have spreading grounds in some parts of our city where the water can be stored and then percolate down, but we don't do enough of that. And with all this hardscape that we're doing, it makes it almost impossible, because you can tell when we have a 1 inch rain, it seems like we had a 10-inch rain, because the LA River all of a sudden begins to rage. And what it's because all the water from the entire city is going through the LA River down to the ocean, and that's a lot of waste. And so I think we have to do wastewater treatment and stormwater treatment also. But back to the question that you asked, which is sewer treatment. I don't know all the technologies on it, but I know I've seen other countries where they've taken their wastewater, and it's kind of hard for me to get my arms around drinking wastewater that's been reclaimed. Yeah, so I'm going to be apt to more put it into ground growing our vegetables, and I'm one who wants to use our parkways for getting away from being a food desert and using things like that. I'm one who would want to use the wastewater for planting trees in the areas that, like Watts and Pacoima and other areas that don't have really much of a tree canopy at all. I was in San Fernando, which is a separate city, different city, on Earth Day, the Saturday after Earth Day. And what I saw was a Native American tribe planting 18 trees in this park that was donated to this Native American tribe. And so I believe that we need to use tree people and other tree groups to take and plant more trees, but we can use this reclaimed wastewater to irrigate our golf courses, to irrigate open space in our parks. And certainly, I believe that we should have these different pipes that will go to the individual communities, so they can pipe into those and do. I have this vision that we can start growing our own vegetables and fruits in our own yards and on our parkways, and have so much access that we can trade to the local restaurant, organic plants, and organic lettuce or whatever we're going to grow by using this reclaimed water. So those are some of the thoughts that I have, but I'm just not the expert when it comes to how do you scientifically get it to do, but I have a vision of how it should be done.
So
go ahead, Craig.
Yeah. When it comes to water, we're just not being honest with the public, right? Again, this comes down to honesty. Over 80% of California's water usage goes to grow 70% of the fruits and vegetables in this country. And we're not going to stop that anytime soon. And no matter what we cut back on a domestic level, we're down to not just cutting the bones, we're just cutting limbs off the body at this point. It is an actual just drop in the bucket. We cannot ask everyday individuals to continue to sacrifice and sacrifice and sacrifice when we understandably don't ask the agricultural community to sacrifice, because it's such an engine of our economy, as well as frankly keeping us alive with feeding us. So instead, we need to focus on supply. And the reality is that this has been demonstrated across the planet to work. And in desert communities, we need to look no further than Saudi Arabia and Israel. Desalination has come an incredibly long way in the last 10 years. We have developed environmentally conscious versions of desalination that take less power. We also live in an area where we have enough power, and we need to stop thinking about this in strict cost terms of, oh, well, this costs this and this costs this, because then what we do is what we say, okay, well, as long as it's cheaper to get water from the Colorado River, let's keep doing it, while neglecting the fact that we are harming and injuring all of these hidden costs around the public, around their water usage. So instead of it costing this much, it's actually costing us this much. We have to invest in generating water, fresh water for usage, and in recycling to 100% recycling rates in order to turn water into an export, not an import. And we've sat down with economists and scientists, and we've done the math on this, right? Think about all of the wastewater treatment that's literally just dumping into the ocean, right? Instead of putting it into the ground. And Mel, to solve your qualms about drinking recycled wastewater, you don't. We put it deep, deep into the ground, and then it's potable. We're not asking you to drink it. And then it goes up through the natural ecosystem of the earth. We don't inject it at a point of usage. We inject it into the natural ecosystem and the life cycle of the planet and water usage on the planet by putting it down into the ground to become part of the holistic system. Now, there is the technology to do this. There's the technology to do it environmentally friendly, and the money is there, right? Like this is not a question. I mean, frankly, there is not enough money in the world for where we're headed with the droughts that are on the West Coast that have no sign of stopping. There's not enough money in the world to solve the problems of climate change. We are in a climate mitigation period, a climate change mitigation period. How do we mitigate the damage? We need to look at not what it costs us now, but what it's going to cost us over the next 10 years, and be very transparent with the public about that. We're just not doing that. But we can get to a place with increased supply without cutting the public back to the bone through aggressive recycling, through aggressive desalination, that allows us to become an exporter and an economic engine of water, as opposed to simply a siphon that's in danger of being cut off at any given moment.
Thank you, Craig, for that answer. We have a question from Coach Ron. Coach, do you want to join the call here, or do you want us to answer that question or ask that question on your behalf? His question, he'd like to know if either of you or both of you support public toilets and hand washing stations that come along with paid community ambassadors in the world famous Skid Row community. That's his choice, word choice. Coach Ron?
Yeah, I just feel that is a strong need to improve conditions for our beloved homeless people there.
Thank you.
Can you repeat the question, please? Coach Ron?
He might be having a challenge connecting. Mel, the question is if you support more public toilets and hand washing stations, especially in the Skid Row area. Essentially, how can we dignify the experience of the community?
Yeah, I think that's a dignified way to do is provide, public facilities, because the people have a choice. Either they're going to use a public facility or they're going to, use the bathroom on the ground, on the floor, which is very, very, unsafe and creates a lot of disease. But at the same time, we have to make sure that there's proper lighting and proper security, because we don't want, these public facilities to become a place where, drug use is going on, or violent abuse against, males or females would take place. So we have to be in a position where we can make it available, but make sure that there's security so that people are not preyed upon when they're trying to, relieve themselves.
Thanks, Mel. Greg?
Yeah, listen, there's no way for us to describe the horrid experience of living on the streets of Los Angeles, a place where, you know, more people die of freezing to death in LA than in New York and San Francisco combined. The indignity of trying to get clean, stay clean, what it means to just be able to take a shower. There's some incredible programs that are doing that. We need to provide resources to create a healthier environment. We learned 400 years ago that letting people use the public space as a bathroom causes cholera and dysentery and kills people, right? Like, are we really talking about the fact that we haven't learned any lessons from the Elizabethan era in England? Yes, we need facilities to get people clean and healthy, but we need to also keep in mind that we're not here to make life on the streets something where people can accept just being there, where we're not here to make it easy. We're here to make sure that we create a dignified experience and the dignity of humanity, but we're here to get people off the streets. And when we have a place for people to go to get help and services that they can trust, that is proven to work, as it's been proven to work in 98 cities across this country, when we actually implement the Community Solutions Functional Zero program, then we won't need these stations anymore, because it is possible to get LA to functional zero homelessness. So we need to keep in mind that whatever accommodations we're providing, they're not permanent, they're temporary, so that we can move towards functional zero homelessness, not so that we can move towards having public facilities for homeless people forever. There shouldn't be any homeless people. And in my administration, we will move towards functional zero homelessness. By the end of my first term, we will be there.
Thank you, Craig. Well, I want to really take a moment here to, recognize, the time and your leadership, Mel Wilson and Craig. Craig, how do we pronounce your last name?
It's a reason the website is craigformayor.com. We're Craig Greiwe for mayor. We'd never get past the second word. It's Craig Greiwe.
Okay.
Like gravy, but with an I.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much. And for everyone that's watching this on their live stream, and this will be on our YouTube page, we really appreciate everybody's involvement. June 7th, we have a primary. I hope everybody in LA gets out there and votes. It's a very important opportunity for us all to really demonstrate our collaborative spirit. We're in the city together, and from my perspective, I love this city. This is home, and I'm not going anywhere. And I just want everyone to sort of take a moment. And Mel, I really appreciate your sentiment of having fun, to enjoy this experience. And with that said, both of you, Greg and Mel, if you have any closing remarks, more than happy to entertain those. But I want to be respectful of everyone's time here.
Sure.
I'll just say one thing, which I'm going to guess that I've got a limb and say that Mel would also agree with, which is to add on to what you're saying, Will. To anyone watching this, it is not enough to vote. I got to be very transparent. Thank you for your vote, but it's not enough. If you support a candidate or you want change in this city, you have to do more than vote. You need to be a lightning rod of information who's constantly talking to people around you. You need to donate. You need to host an event. You need to recruit your friends to go to events for the candidates you choose to support. We know from the polls that more than half of Angelenos are quote unquote undecided. They're not undecided. That's a separate issue. That more than half of Angelenos are undecided about who they're going to vote for, and that we've created a narrative of who this race is about. This race, the number one candidate in this race is the voter who says, I don't want any of the candidates, or I don't know anything that's going on. So if you're paying attention, if you've decided, if you want to go out on a limb and support a candidate, you cannot just vote. You have got to get out there and take action. And yes, it is painful, but look at the damn streets, look at the prices, look at the housing policy. It is all painful, and it will continue to be painful unless for the next 4 weeks, you choose to take 4 weeks out of your life and your bandwidth to get involved and do something, to donate and to invite your friends. And yes, when your friends say, I don't want to get involved in politics, you say, this is the time. But we need people to do more than vote, or this will just be the same old narrative that it's been for 30 years. You have got to do more than vote. And that is my entreaty for you. Whether you are supporting Mel or I hope you are supporting me, you have got to do more. Because as mayor, you're going to expect me to do more, which means I'm going to expect every member of the public to do more. Because if we don't, it is just more of the same. And that has led us where we are, and that's unacceptable.
Thank you, Craig. Mel, final remarks?
Yes, thank you. And hopefully it's not my final remarks, just my final remarks to you today. Well, you know, I just wanted to just recap. Craig, it's good to be in the race with you. Yeah, you have a big heart. I can see your passion, and I want to see a lot of what you're trying to get done. So let me just thank you for what you've done so far over the years that I've been engaged with you. I served on the Metro board in the 90s, and you were at the table then. I served on the Metro board in 2010, and you were at the table then. Your members were, I'm a housing expert. That's my wheelhouse, and a transportation expert. I don't know it all, but here's what I do know. I've had 3 different mayors who trusted me. Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa, Mayor Richard Reardon, and Mayor Tom Bradley. And here's what they all said about Mel Wilson. You know, he's honest, he's a hard worker, he has integrity, he's a team player, and it's a job done. And I have a track record. I have a track record of getting the job done, not for what I was looking for anything for me. Frankly, I was doing it for the betterment of our city. I love our city. And I love living here, but you know, the city is not the city that I grew up in. It's deteriorated. And so these 3 mayors picked me because they knew that I got the job done. When Antonio Villaraigosa could not get along with his colleagues on the Metro board that were Republicans, and I'm a Democrat, but he said to me, Mel, you know, these guys like you, they trust you, they respect you. I need you on my team. And so my initial answer to him was, no, I don't want to do it. And people thought I was crazy for wanting to turn it down. They even thought I was crazy when I resigned from the Metro board after my first 4 years. They just said, wow, why would you do that? Because I have, you know, my life is not about, you know, running for office or all of this kind of stuff. My life really is to make a difference anywhere I go. And so I've done that. I'm a CSUN business grad. I was an All-American football player. I am used to going up against tough opponents. I was drafted in the 5th round by the New York Football Giants, and I played CSUN on a losing team, no less. But guess what? I was an All-American my senior year, and I only played that position 1 year. I played 3 different positions, actually 4 different positions at CSUN, which is unheard of in college, to do that and make all conference at 3 out of the 4 years. It's just unheard of. So I'm accustomed to learning, working with people, and I'm accustomed to getting things done. And so that's why I know I'm the best candidate to be mayor of LA City. I've worked with all these different county boards of supervisors, so I understand how the processes work, and I understand now that it's not working. But I'm a person who brings people together. I've worked with you multiple times over to pull together the whole transit-oriented community. That wasn't me. That was a group of us all working together to come to a point where we were going to get rid of the business tax, which we know is really discouraging architects and car dealers and others from locating in our city. They operate outside the city, in Culver City and Santa Monica and Pasadena and places like that, instead of in the city of LA, because it's just, you're not fairly treated. So I've worked with all these complex problems. I am not a billionaire, guys. You know, I started out dirt poor, raised by a single mother and a grandmother. And, you know, I know that I've worked my way into the middle class. I've been a business owner for 40 years in this city. And that is a tough call, you know, to work for 40 years in a city of LA when you have to make payroll. And sometimes I didn't make a profit. I made payroll all the time, but I didn't make a profit most of the time because I did it for the good. And so I know how to bring people together. I was president of the Chamber of Commerce in Pacoima, which I stopped a food desert from being a food desert and made our first shopping center. We defeated redlining. I know that when I was president of the United Chambers of Commerce, which is in San Fernando Valley, we had 32 chambers who were all part of my board of directors. You know, I was the president of the Realtor Association here in the San Fernando Valley with 11,000 members. I have the housing industry who's supporting me, the BIA folks. I've been working with them from the early stages. This is not me just coming to the party late. So here's what I know. There are 12 people who certified to get on this ballot. And the media would like you to think there's only 5 who really have a chance, but that's not the reality. The reality is that I'm the only one in the San Fernando Valley who has a chance of getting elected. And I have a stake in this valley. I was the humanitarian of the year 2 years ago, appointed by the Valley Economic Alliance, because I've just done so much good work in the valley. So I have a stakehold in the valley, but moreover, I have a lot of folks who are supporting me, Republicans, Democrats, the client to state, and I have a lot of folks in the faith community who are supporting me too. So I know that there's a path for me to win. All I have to do is get 20% of the votes, and I'm in the runoff. That's it. It's not like I have to get 50% of the vote. The last time they had a poll, it showed that 40% of the San Fernando Valley voters were still, I think it showed that Caruso had like 28% or 23%, and Bass had like 15%, but there's still 57% that is unaccounted for. And I'm going to get my share of those folks. And I'm in Watts. I've got a lot of folks in Watts who are supporting me, South LA, a lot of Blacks, a lot of Latinos, and others who are supporting me. So I have a path, and I'm asking all of you to help me take this ball over the finish line. I'm a football guy. So, that help me get close to the end zone, and we're going to score, folks. We are going to score. I will be the best mayor for housing. I'll be the best mayor for development, but I also will honor and respect neighborhood groups too, because I'll bring them at the table early on and not late. And so that's what I'm asking you to do, is don't count me out. Realize that I'm an underdog, but at the same time, the odds are I'm going to get in this runoff. I don't care what other folks are saying. I'm telling you what I'm looking at the numbers. All I need is 20%, and the Valley has 41% of those folks. So I'm chipping away at Karen Bass's backyard. I'm chipping away at Kevin De Leon's backyard. You know what? I just know that I'm gonna fight my way to the top. And when I get in the runoff, you're gonna be right there with me, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. And once again, I really want to just, with sincerity, just say thank you. So, Craig and Mel, have a wonderful evening, and let's stay in touch. And Hava and Tracy, on behalf of the AIA, thank you so much for your leadership. We will see everyone soon.
Thank you all. Thank you, Hava. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you so much,
Coach Ron. And good to see you, Craig. And Will, keep up the good work. You've been doing it for so many years. I'm just proud to work alongside you. You're good people, and you know the issues, and you fight for them. And I'll be there with you all the way. Thank you so much, all of you.
Well, excellent. All right, everyone have a great evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Craig. Good talking to you.
Bye.
Bye.